everyone. Welcome to the February episode of Book Adventures. Our book this month is called The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read. It was written by Rita Lorraine Hubbard and illustrated by the Caldecott Honor winner, Oge Mora. So listen in and we'll get started on this one. The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read by Rita Lorraine Hubbard and Caldecott Honor winner, Oge Mora. Whenever young Mary Walker was tired, she would shield her eyes from the sun and watch the swallow-tailed kites dip and soar above the trees. That must be what it's like to be free, she thought. But Mary didn't watch for long. Even at only 8 years old, she knew the first rule of the Union Springs, Alabama plantation she lived on: keep working. She knew the second rule, too. Slaves should not be taught to read or write or do anything that might help them learn to do so. Mary didn't stop working. She didn't learn to read either, but at the end of each long day picking cotton, toting water to Papa and the other slaves who chopped wood for the train tracks, or helping Mama clean the big house, she would lie in her little bed next to the crumbling fireplace and think about those birds. When I'm free, I'll go wherever I want and rest when I want, and I'll learn to read, too. When she was 15, it happened. Mary and her mother, brothers, and sister were free. The Emancipation Proclamation said so. What it didn't say was how a family with nothing except the tattered garments on their backs could find food, clothes, and a place to sleep. Mary's father had died, and the family was on its own. Freedom Road to Freedom Road. Across fields and through woods, ex-slaves surged like waves crashing hard to shore. Now that they were free, every road was Freedom Road. Many headed north and west and every which way, searching for long-lost family members or simply experiencing the wonder of being free. Others, like Mary, chose to stay in the South. An organization called the Freedmen's Bureau helped those who stayed to find shelter on abandoned Confederate land. Mary and her family settled in a one-room cabin, and for the next few years, she worked alongside her mama to help feed her siblings. 7 days a week, she churned butter, cleaned houses, and cared for other folks' children. The hours were long, and if Mary was thirsty or hungry or needed to use the outhouse, she had to wait until she got home. At week's end, she would offer Mama the one lonely quarter she had earned. One day, Mary met a group of evangelists on the roadside. A woman with soft wrinkles in her kindly face placed a big, beautiful Bible in Mary's hands and told her, "Your civil rights are in these pages." Mary didn't know what civil rights were. She only knew that top to bottom, front to back, the book was filled with words. "I'm going to learn to read those words," she vowed. But not today. Today, there was work to be done. And tomorrow, too. When Mary got married, she and her husband worked as sharecroppers, renting someone else's house, using someone else's tools, and planting someone else's seeds to farm land they would never own. After they harvested the crops, almost all the money they earned went to pay for the housing, tool, and seed costs. Mary was 20 years old when her first son was born. She opened her Bible and marveled at the squiggles inside. There had been no time to learn to read. A friend wrote Mary's son's birth date in the Bible, August 26th, 1869. Then Mary dipped a pen into an inkwell and made her mark beside it. Not a letter, not a name, just a mark. It was the best she could do. One day, Mary's husband died. She married again, and a second son was born, then a third. Mary made marks for these sons, too. Now she had 3 growing boys. More money, that's what we need, Mary thought. but the only other jobs available to Black women were as maids or nannies or cooks. The hours were long, with only a half a day off on Saturdays, and like sharecropping, they didn't pay much. Mary sighed. Words would have to wait. For the next 4 decades, Mary sharecropped and did odd jobs to help support her family. In 1917, Mary's family moved to the little city of Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was the year of Chattanooga's Great Flood. The story was in all the newspapers, but Mary could only study the pictures to understand what had happened. By now, Mary was 68 and too old to sharecrop, but she continued to work, cooking, cleaning, and babysitting. She also fried fish, baked cakes, and sold sandwiches to raise money for her church. On Sundays, she would sit in the congregation, and as the preacher spoke, she would clutch her family Bible, the Bible she still couldn't read. When Mary was well past 90, she and her husband sat in their creaky rockers while one or another of their sons read to them. After the 2 younger sons died, the eldest read. Then Mary's husband died. Several years later, her eldest son died too. He was 94. Mary had outlived her entire family. She was 114 years old and alone. "Can't read," she said. "Can't write. I don't know anything." Mary stood at the window of her retirement home and gazed down at the world below. Words were everywhere, on billboards, on buildings, on store windows and trucks. She sighed. All this time, she thought, and they still look like squiggles. Mary had heard about a new reading class held in her building. She pursed her lips. No more waiting, she decided. Time to learn. Out of her apartment, into an elevator, and down to the lobby she went. When the elevator doors sprang open, Mary saw people sitting under a sign with a picture of an open book. She could not read the words. A neighbor walked up to her. "That's a reading class, Miss Mary. Can I help you over?" Mary shook her head. Then she gripped her cane, lifted her chin, and walked straight toward that sign. For the next year and more, Mary put everything she had into learning to read. It wasn't easy. After all, she was the oldest student in the class, and probably in the entire country. Could someone her age learn to read? She didn't know, but by God, she was going to try. She studied the alphabet until her eyes watered. She memorized the sounds each letter made and practiced writing her name so many times that her fingers cramped. She learned to recognize sight words and then challenged herself to make short sentences with them. She studied and studied until books and pages and letters and words swirled in her head while she slept. One fine day, Mary's hard work paid off. She could read. Word of her accomplishment traveled, and people everywhere celebrated with her. Chattanooga's mayor, newspaper journalists across the country, and a man from the U.S. Department of Education who said, "Mrs. Mary Walker, I pronounce you the nation's oldest student." All shared her joy. Mary felt complete. She still missed her sons, but whenever she was lonely, she read from her Bible or looked out her window and read the words in the street below. From then on, Chattanoogans honored Mary's achievement with yearly birthday parties. In 1966, President Lyndon B. Johnson sent well wishes on Mary's 118th birthday, and in 1969, President Richard Nixon did the same. Mary was now 121 years old. Mary received many gifts over the years. A radio, a sofa, her very first television, a new Bible, the key to the city, and perfume and champagne from the Canadian Mounties. She also received something that brought back those long days in the Alabama cotton fields, her first airplane ride. From the cockpit window, Mary gazed at the trees and rooftops below. "No different than a horse and buggy ride," she joked. But she knew it was. As the airplane dipped and soared like those swallow-tailed kites of long ago, Mary decided that flying was a lot like reading. They both made a body feel as free as a bird. Each year, before her birthday celebration came to an end, someone would whisper, "Let's listen to Miss Mary." The shuffling and movement would fade away until not a sound was heard. Then Mary would stand on her old legs, clear her old throat, and read from her Bible or her school book in a voice that was clear and strong. When she finished, she would gently close her book and say, "You're never too old to learn." That's the end of the story, but here's a note from the author. Mary Walker was born a slave on May 6, 1848. From a young age, she picked cotton, toted water, cleaned houses, and worked as a blacksmith. In later life, she never forgot the harsh punishment slaves received if they stopped working without permission, but she was quick to say that she had forgiven everyone for the things she'd endured. Very little is known about Mary's life from her emancipation at age 15 until she learned to read at 116. But it is a fact that her Bible waited 101 years for her to learn to read it. It is known that Mary was married twice and had 3 sons. One of those sons served in World War I chose to imagine other details to fill in the blanks. Mary's eldest son died in 1963. She enrolled in CALM, the Chattanooga Area Literacy Movement, the same year, and by 1964 she knew how to read, write, add, and subtract. She was then certified as the nation's oldest student and was twice named Chattanooga's Ambassador of Goodwill. Her retirement home was renamed the Mary Walker Towers. Mary received the key to the city of Chattanooga in 1966 and 1969. Her first airplane ride happened on May 6, 1966, when pilot Harry Porter flew her over her apartment building so she could wave to her friends below. Before Mary's death at age 121, on December 1st, 1969, she could still see and hear well. She could still hold a pencil and write her name steadily, and she could walk with only minimal help from her trusty cane. She could also still sew beautiful bonnets and bake cakes that she bragged were light as a feather. Mary lived through 26 presidents. Today, historical marker 2A73 stands at 3031 Wilcox Boulevard in Chattanooga, Tennessee, to commemorate her amazing life. Here are some photographs from Mary's life. Her reading her favorite book, the Bible, her first airplane ride, her 99th birthday, age 121 in Chattanooga. I'll flip so you can see the other ones. Reading to her teacher, Helen Kelly, and Helen Kelly presenting Mary with her first graduation certificate, which declares that she can read. That's The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read by Rita Lorraine Hubbard and Caldecott Honor winner Oge Mora. I hope you enjoyed listening to The Oldest Student. Hopefully you've been able to visit the library and pick up a kit to go with this month's episode. When you open up your kit, you'll find a few things inside. Let's see. The first thing I want you to find is this pink piece of cardstock. We are going to use that to make our very own collage. So there's a few other things inside to help you with your collage. You'll find some scrapbook paper, some construction paper. You'll find a piece of music, and some book pages. You'll also find some newspaper. So this collage can be about whatever you want it to be, but I want you to be inspired by the illustrations from our story today. If you were looking closely, you may have noticed tucked in all of the illustrations are words and music. You can see some music notes here. And then this is a tree made from a receipt. Let's see. Words here, like from a newspaper or a book. You can see this man at church. He has words on his cuff and on his shirt. Let's see. And you may have also noticed, before Mary learns to read in the book, everything that might have been a word, it's all squiggles. Just like she said, all she could ever see were squiggles. But as she starts to learn to read, that's when she can look out and see signs that say things like, happy birthday. You also see on her dress, there's scraps of words making up her dress. Let's see. The plane, when she took her first plane ride, it was from a page of a book or newspaper. And she can finally read the words on her Holy Bible. So, you are going to make your very own collage inspired by the artwork, the illustrations of Oge Mora. So, think about something you really enjoy. Maybe you want to make a collage of your house, or your backyard, or your family. Use whatever inspires you, and make sure you use lots and lots of the newspaper print words, the music pages, and the book pages too. And of course, as always, share a photo of your creation in the comments. All right, when you're all done with your collage, there is another activity for you too. You'll find 2 pieces of lined paper like this. You can actually fold these in half. You're gonna make kind of a little book. Like that. All right, so for this next activity, you need to come up with some questions that you would want to ask someone, such as a grandparent or an older family friend like that. Mary Walker lived to be 121 years old, and her life changed a lot over all that time. And she saw the world change a lot. She was around for 26 presidents, I think is what it said at the end of our story. Yes, 26 presidents. Life changed a lot. So, in this book, you are going to make your own interview questions. You can ask things like, what was your childhood like when you grew up? What did you want to be when you grew up? What was school like? Did you like going? Things like that. Think of any questions about how time is different now from it was back then. All right, so it's up to you. You can create your own little book. You can use the boxes at the top to write in your question and then write down your friend's answers here. Or you can even draw a picture up in those boxes too. So you have lots of space to fill it out however you would like, and you can always add more pages to this too. Thank you so much for tuning in to this month's book adventure. I hope to see you next month. Bye.